Not every friendship ends because of one big betrayal. Some end because you finally get tired of being disrespected. If you are new here, welcome to video 4 of the Radiate, Don't Accommodate series, which is all about friendship breakups. Friendship breakups are a very real thing, but we aren't talking about them enough. So let's just talk about them. And be sure to stay until the end because I have the grand finale action step for this series. My final friendship breakup story is about Dawn. And again, all names have been changed. I met Dawn at a pool party in November 2019. And if you're new to this channel or this series, I'm Angie, the Inner Glow Coach, and I live in Honolulu, Hawaii on Oahu. I've lived here since 2018, so going to a pool party in November is nothing out of the ordinary, although it's not something I normally do. But Dawn and I connected on Instagram when we initially met, but we didn't really start hanging out until March 2020 when everything shut down for COVID, because most of the island was obeying the don't even leave your house fear propaganda, but not Dawn and I, because we craved being outside. So initially everything was closed. The beach, the hikes, the ocean was open, which I'll get to that in a minute. But the only other thing that was open were the sidewalks. So it started by taking walks every day or almost every day. And the only other friends I was hanging out at the time was the garage gang, which was because the gyms were closed. My friend Erica had a gym set up in her garage, and my friend Jess is a personal trainer. So my friend Carly and I and Jess, we'd go to Erica's garage and work out every Friday morning. But that was just once a week for an hour or so. So other than the garage gang, Dawn initially was the only other person I was hanging out with. And I was one of the few people that she was hanging out with. So for that reason, Dawn and I became really close really fast. And another person I started hanging out with during this time was my surf instructor, Ozzy. And this is a whole separate story that is like my own drama, but it does tie into Dawn. So I'm gonna give you the Cliff Notes version before I continue on with Dawn. So during COVID, one of the few things that was open was the ocean because the state doesn't have jurisdiction to close the ocean. So I'm originally from Chicago. I used to not be an ocean person, but I was so desperate to be outside and do something unrestricted during COVID that I was like, I need to learn how to surf so I have something legally available to me during COVID when everything's closed. And I had taken a surf lesson the summer before with a surf instructor. His name was Ozzy. Again, all names changed. And so I texted him to see if he would be down to give me lessons during COVID, and he was. And initially, it was just lessons. It was just an instructor-student relationship. And he was married, and he told me that his wife had moved back to New Zealand because the reason he gave me initially made sense because he said it was like safer because of COVID or something like that, which at the time made sense because everything was weird and confusing, so it just fit in with that theme. But anyway, as Ozzy and I surfed more and took lessons, we became friends. So we started hanging out outside of lessons, and actually quite frequently, almost every day. And once we became friends, he confided in me that they were actually separated, and when she came back, that they were splitting up and moving on and it was over. And so the relationship with Ozzy turned romantic because I thought his marriage was over because that's how it was explained to me. And so that was going on for like 6 months, and then she finally came back, and that's when he was like, oh yeah, by the way, we need to be married on paper for 2 more years so that she can get her green card. So I'm gonna stay married with her and then still be in a relationship with you. And I was like, oh, no, we're not. So again, that's just the short version. So that ended in a dumpster fire, but this comes into play with my friendship with Dawn. Because one of the first red flags about Dawn appeared during the time that Ozzy and I were just friends and hanging out all of the time. So Dawn all of a sudden wanted to take surf lessons with him too, which that in itself seemed innocent, although it was kind of strange because she was a more advanced surfer than I was. But in my mind, I was like, oh, maybe she just wants to brush up on her skills or whatever. So it wasn't totally weird. But the weird thing was, once she actually started taking lessons with him, she would start texting him all the time, like they're friends. Like she would be like, hey, what's up? And text him pictures and stuff. And the reason that I know this is because he would show me, because he also thought it was weird. It was almost as though she was trying to befriend him behind my back, because she wouldn't tell me that she was texting him and trying to be friends with him. He would, and he also thought it was weird. So, but again, it didn't seem like a glaring red flag at the time. And the other thing about, and actually I'm not gonna go into all the details, because another thing I wanna say up front is I'm not criticizing any of these friends that I talk about my friendship stories. I played a role in this dynamic, and I'll explain that more at the end. So I won't get into all the like petty details, but a few of the major red flags about Dawn. If you have read my book, Running in Slippers, or know anything about my past, I had a near-death experience, and I talk about this a lot on my podcast guesting. And when I tell the story, I say I was unconscious in my home for a day and a half, and then I was in the hospital for a day and a half. And a lot of people ask me, well, how did you get to the hospital? Dawn was my friend that took me to the hospital. And initially, I had no memory of her taking me to the hospital because I was totally blacked out. But in the months afterwards, I started to remember some more things about that time period when she took me to the hospital. And one of the things that I remembered is that when she picked me up, I was wearing a sports bra and booty shorts. So keep in mind, I had been unconscious in my home, and she didn't know how long, but I don't think it matters. The important thing is she was taking me to the emergency room. She looked at me and she said, "Is that what you're wearing to the hospital?" And the reason this memory came back to me is because when I was discharged from the hospital, in addition to my sports bra and booty shorts, I had a flannel shirt. And it was October, and October in Hawaii is still very hot. So it was so confusing to me. I was like, why did I have a flannel shirt? And as like the memory started coming back, I realized it was because of that snarky comment that she made to me, which honestly is just super uncompassionate. Like, she was taking me to the emergency room. Also, they ended up taking off my clothes and putting on a hospital gown anyway, so it doesn't matter what I'm wearing to the emergency room. And so that was one huge red flag. Another huge red flag is, again, the whole Aussie disaster ended in a dumpster fire. And a few months later, I was still sad about it. And I remember we went surfing one day and I expressed that I was still sad. And just really cold and blunt, she was like, "You need to get over him." And it's like, no, Sherlock, I'm trying to get over him, but it's a process. It's like, just because, and she was boy crazy and always trying to heal her heartbreak with another relationship. So I think just because I wasn't doing that, it seemed weird to her. But still, it just seemed very uncompassionate and unsupportive. And the last major red flag was my book, Running in Slippers. When I was writing it, I self-published it. So any journey is not linear. So there were ups, there were downs. And at one point during a down, I was struggling with something and I was expressing that to her. And again, just really cold and uncompassionate. She was like, "I don't know why you don't just quit." And it just felt so gross and unsupportive. And just in general, the thing about Dawn was she was very critical toward me. And initially I didn't even notice it because it felt familiar, because that's how my mom always was to me. So it was just normal. But I started my healing journey in earnest after the hospital incident. So as I started healing, I started noticing like, I don't think this is okay, like how she's treating me. And Anyway, so Dawn eventually got this boyfriend. She was spending a lot of time with him. I was on my healing journey, starting to realize that this friendship probably wasn't the healthiest for me. So we had already started diverging paths, although we would still sometimes hang out or whatever. And I think eventually we would have just slow faded and the friendship would have ended that way. But it did end with a bang because the surf community is very gossipy, and for the most part, I stay out of it. However, you can't prevent things just falling on your lap. So that's what happened with the situation with Dawn. Someone reached out to me and was feeding me information with receipts that Dawn had, not only was she still friends with Ozzy and befriending him and communicating with him and being friendly with him, she had also befriended Ozzy's wife and was like talking to both of them and being friendly. And that really hurt my feelings because he hurt me so much. And anyone who's had heartbreak by betrayal knows how bad that hurts because he was leading me to believe that him and his wife were getting divorced only to find out that they weren't. And again, the whole story is very dramatic. He was very manipulative about it and it hurt me so bad. So the fact that she was friends with both of them behind my back hurt me so much. So when I was still triggered, I sent her a text, which I do not recommend because it was very and whatever. And she responded to my text and basically she told me that she was playing neutral and not choosing sides and that she didn't have any reason not to like them. And I've talked in my other videos about when you are evaluating the people in your life to see if they're good for you, you may not be able to pinpoint specific reasons logically, but you always know by how it feels in your body. And I remember when I read that text, it just felt so gross and disgusting because for her to not see anything wrong with befriending people who, and the wife is kind of a neutral party because she didn't, whatever. But anyway, it just felt gross and disgusting in my body. So when I calmed down, which I do recommend texting when you're calmed down or communicating when you calm down, I was basically just like, hey, this isn't working for me and I don't want to be friends anymore. And she didn't respond, which admittedly hurt my feelings, but in all fairness, it didn't require a response. And this friendship breakup hurt pretty bad because I also felt betrayed by her. And it wasn't so much that I missed the friendship because, first of all, again, we hadn't been hanging out as much. And I was more hurt by the fact by how she had treated me throughout the friendship. Because again, she was just very critical and cold. But even worse, I beat myself up for allowing myself to be treated that way. And again, just to be clear, I'm not criticizing her because through my own healing journey, I realized that a lot of the criticism that she projected onto me had very little to do with me. And I played a role in the dysfunction by not speaking up about it. Although in all fairness, there was one time I did have a conversation with her because she said something that hurt my feelings. And I said something to her and we had a conversation about it. And then she kept being critical. But again, I didn't speak up about it. So I do take accountability for that. And to wrap this whole thing up, after the friendship ended, well, first of all, when we were friends, Dawn and I used to go on this one hike together and she would always time us and it was just like a straight ascent. And our average time was 21 minutes, which is a pretty good time because I think it takes most people like a half an hour. But after the breakup, I went on this hike by myself and I would time myself and my average time was about 18 minutes. So that made me realize how much she had been pulling me down in many other ways. And again, I take accountability for letting her, but my point is This is why it is so important to have standards for who you allow in your life, because people, if you, and again, everyone's on their own journey. I'm not criticizing anyone, but if you have friends that are outside of your level, like, because even having a friend on a too high level is not healthy either, because you're gonna pull them down, but having someone who's on a lower level, they pull you down. And the dangerous part about that is a lot of times you're not even aware of it. So this is why it's so important to be consistently aware, at the very least, of how your body feels when you're around people, because she had been pulling me down in so many other ways, and I didn't even realize it until afterwards when I was hiking or reflecting on things, and I was like, wow, again, I take accountability, because it's like I was allowing it. So that was my lesson with this friendship. So here is your action step for the grand finale of this series. And this one requires a lot of honesty with yourself, because if you've been doing the other action steps, you've had time to evaluate your friendships, and now you need to think about where you may need to enforce boundaries. So if someone is consistently draining your energy, you will need to spend less time with them. If someone is criticizing you or giving backhanded compliments, you need to say something and stick up for yourself. And if someone repeatedly ignores your boundaries, it may be time for distance. And I can do a whole video on boundaries, but one thing I will say is a boundary is more than just stating it. You also have to enforce it with consequences. So for example, if you tell someone, hey, that hurt my feelings, please don't criticize me again, and they keep doing it, then you need to be able to back up your enforcing the boundary by saying like, hey, I can't spend as much time with you, or whatever the enforcing means. Like, you have to stick to your boundaries and enforce them. It's not enough just to state it, because trust me, when you set a boundary, some people will be testing them. And if someone is especially toxic, it may be time for the breakup. And again, friendship breakups can hurt just as much as a romantic breakup, but it hurts so much more being with someone who isn't healthy for you, because boundaries aren't about punishing other people. They're about being a functional adult and protecting your nervous system and your emotional safety, because your emotional and physical safety should always be your number one priority. So yes, it may hurt, but what hurts more is allowing dysfunctional behavior from other people drain your mental health. And that was the harsh truth that I had to learn with the Dawn situation. So just to be clear, this entire series is not about blaming other people. It's about self-trust and learning to choose emotional safety over familiarity or comfort or convenience. And I'm not denying that friendship breakups are painful, but staying in relationships that require you to abandon yourself are far more damaging. You're allowed to have high standards, you are allowed to change, and you are definitely allowed to outgrow people without villainizing them or yourself or feeling any shame about it. So thank you for being here for this series, and I hope you walk away trusting yourself just a little bit more than you did before.